Elias had always thought his job as a diplomat would be about negotiations and formality. He had spent most of his career working behind the scenes, coordinating trade agreements and peace talks, but nothing had prepared him for the alien queen. The planet he had arrived on was nothing like Earth. The air was thick with the scent of unfamiliar flowers, and the sky above was a swirling blend of colors he had never seen before. The architecture was unlike anything on Earth, with towering structures made of materials that shimmered like glass, bending and shifting in the light. Everything here seemed alive, alive with a strange, almost unsettling energy. Elias had heard stories about the alien races in the galaxy, but he never imagined he would find himself face to face with their rulers. Queen Zaravira was unlike any leader he had ever encountered. She was regal tall and exuded an aura of power that made her presence undeniable. Her long, flowing black hair cascaded down her back like a river of darkness, and her eyes, dark and piercing, seemed to see straight through him. She wore a gown made of shifting, iridescent fabric that shimmered with every movement, giving her the appearance of someone who existed not entirely in the present moment. Her beauty was intimidating, and her intelligence was even more so. Elias had been briefed on the Queen's reputation before his arrival, but he had never imagined the woman in person would hold such an overpowering presence. As he stood in the grand hall of the alien palace, trying to keep his composure, he couldn't help but feel like an ant under the shadow of a mountain. She was the ruler of a vast empire, a species far older and more advanced than humanity. And yet he had been chosen to represent his people before her. The meeting had started as expected. Formal introductions were made, and both sides exchanged pleasantries. There were discussions about trade routes, security concerns, and other matters of mutual interest. Elias had prepared his speech meticulously, knowing that the fate of humanity's relationship with this empire depended on the outcome of this meeting. But as he spoke, he couldn't shake the feeling that Zaravira wasn't entirely interested in his words. Her gaze was focused on him, but her expression remained unreadable. At times, it almost seemed as though she wasn't listening at all, her eyes scanning the room or drifting to something far beyond the palace walls. It unnerved him, but Elias pressed on, trying to maintain his professionalism. That was when the moment occurred, when everything changed. Elias' phone buzzed quietly in his pocket. He had almost forgotten about it, as he hadn't expected any messages during the meeting. He glanced down quickly, just to check that it wasn't something urgent. To his surprise, the screen displayed a photo of the alien queen, Zaravira herself. The picture had been taken during a previous diplomatic exchange, captured while she was standing in front of a holographic map, her expression one of deep concentration. Without thinking, Elias reached for his phone and swiped the screen to check the message. As he did, his fingers hesitated on the touchpad, unsure of whether it was appropriate to look at the image in front of the queen. He knew that, by human standards, this could be seen as rude, distracting himself during such an important conversation. But before he could make up his mind, the queen's voice cut through the silence, her tone sharp but measured. "Is that me on your phone?" Elias froze. His heart skipped a beat as his hand trembled, almost dropping the phone. He quickly looked up at Zaravira, who was now staring at him with an intense, unwavering gaze. There was no hiding the curiosity in her eyes, mixed with something else he couldn't quite identify, maybe suspicion, maybe amusement. His mind raced. I'm sorry," he stammered, immediately trying to explain. "It wasn't intentional, Your Majesty. But Zaravira didn't allow him to finish. She took a step closer, her long gown trailing behind her like liquid silk, and reached out with one graceful hand. Her eyes never left his as she waited for him to hand over the phone. Elias hesitated. This wasn't a simple situation. In all his years as a diplomat, he had never been in a position where a ruler of such immense power directly confronted him over something so personal. And yet the request was oddly calm, almost curious, but there was no denying the authority in her presence. Reluctantly, Elias handed her the phone, his fingers brushing against hers for a brief moment. Zaravira took the device with a steady hand and raised it to her eye level. She seemed unfazed by the photo displayed on the screen, her expression unchanged as she studied the image. "Why do you have this?" she asked, her voice soft but with a sharp edge. There was something in her question that made it feel less like a simple inquiry and more like a challenge. Elias could feel the sweat beading on the back of his neck, his mind scrambling for an answer that would satisfy the queen. He had not expected this. What could he say? That he found her appearance captivating, that her presence had left an impression on him, or that the image had been a simple souvenir from a previous meeting. I didn't mean any disrespect, Elias managed, trying to steady his breathing. It's just you're the queen, your majesty. I thought the photo was, well, important. It's from the last time we met. It was, a good moment, a meaningful one. Zaravira's gaze remained fixed on him, her lips twitching slightly as though considering his words. For a moment she said nothing, simply observing him with a mixture of curiosity and contemplation. Then, without warning, she lowered the phone and handed it back to him. "You humans," she murmured, her voice almost to herself, as though she were lost in thought. "You have such strange ways of holding on to memories." Elias didn't know how to respond to that. He didn't want to seem too forward, but part of him couldn't resist asking. "What do you mean?" Zaravira paused, her expression softening just slightly. She seemed to weigh her words before speaking again. "You capture images, moments with your devices as if to freeze time," she said, her tone distant, as though she were reflecting on a concept foreign to her own existence. But can such images truly hold meaning beyond the moment they were taken? Elias didn't quite know how to answer that. It was a question that, in truth, he had never really thought about. To him, the picture had simply been a part of the diplomatic exchange, a visual record of their encounter. But now, in the Queen's presence, the idea of keeping something so personal, a photo of her, the alien ruler, seemed almost strange. "You ask a deep question," Elias said after a long pause, his voice thoughtful. "I suppose we keep photos to remember moments, even when those moments pass us by. It's a way of holding on to something, even if it's just for ourselves." Zaravira tilted her head slightly, as if considering his answer. "Perhaps," she mused, "but humans have a tendency to forget the true meaning behind what they capture." Elias opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, the queen turned away, her attention shifting to something else in the room. The conversation was over for now, but the weight of her words lingered in the air. The rest of the meeting proceeded without much more interruption, though Elias couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The queen had taken a simple gesture, a photo on a phone, and turned it into a moment of profound reflection. And in doing so, she had given him a glimpse into a side of her that he had never expected to see. As he left the palace that evening, Elias couldn't help but wonder about the queen. She was a ruler, a symbol of power and authority, yet in that brief moment she had shown herself to be something more. Someone who, like him, might be looking for something deeper, something more than what their roles dictated. And as Elias stared at the stars above, he wondered what this strange encounter might lead to. Was it simply a diplomatic exchange, or something more? Only time would tell. The days following the unexpected interaction with Queen Zaravira left Elias unsettled. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had stumbled into something far deeper than a mere diplomatic meeting. Her question, "Why do you have this?" echoed in his mind, and the look she had given him when she handed back his phone lingered in his thoughts. She was far more than just a queen. She was a being of immense intelligence, capable of seeing things differently than any human could. Elias spent the next few days navigating the alien palace, doing his best to follow the agenda of the diplomatic mission. His official duties were routine, but his mind constantly returned to that moment. What had she meant by "you humans"? What was it about that photograph that had intrigued her so much? The palace, with its towering walls and strange crystalline structures, seemed to pulsate with a quiet energy. The air felt different here, thick with a strange, almost electric charge. It was a place that seemed alive, as if the very walls were aware of every movement. Elias often found himself lost in thought, his gaze wandering as he tried to make sense of the queen's actions. On the third day of his stay, Zaravira summoned him once again. This time, there was no official business to discuss. It was an informal meeting, something Elias hadn't anticipated. He found himself standing in a small, serene room within the palace, the walls made of transparent material that overlooked a garden filled with strange, glowing plants. The soft hum of alien technology filled the space, yet there was a peacefulness in the room that seemed to soften the edges of the harsh power that Zaravira exuded. The queen was already there, sitting on a low platform at the center of the room. Her eyes, dark and unblinking, watched Elias as he entered, The regal air about her was still present, but there was something else in her gaze, curiosity. She looked at him like he was a puzzle she was trying to solve. "Sit," she commanded, her voice firm yet not unkind. Elias obeyed, sitting across from her on a similar platform. He couldn't help but notice the way her gown seemed to change in the light, as if it were alive, shifting with every movement. "I have been thinking," Zaravira began, her tone measured. "About what you said the other day, about memories and photographs." Elias raised an eyebrow. He wasn't sure what she meant at first, but her words pulled him back into the moment. "What about them, your majesty?" he asked cautiously. "Humans," she said, her voice carrying a hint of wonder. "You collect memories like treasures. You capture images of people, places, and moments as though you can hold on to them forever. But what do they mean? Are they truly memories if they exist only in an image?" Elias was taken aback by the question. It wasn't something he had ever thought about in such depth. To him, photographs were simply tools to remember things, to capture fleeting moments that could be revisited later. But Zaravira's question struck him. Could a photograph truly hold the essence of a moment, or was it merely a hollow reflection? "I suppose. I never thought about it that way," Elias said slowly. "I just thought of them as a way to preserve memories, to look back and remember things that might fade over time." "And yet," Zaravira mused, her voice thoughtful, "you cannot capture the true essence of a moment. You cannot capture the feelings, the thoughts that accompany it. You are only left with a fragment, a mere reflection." Elias considered this. He had always believed that a photograph was a perfect representation of a memory, a way to preserve what was important. But now, hearing it from Zaravira, it made him wonder. Was a photo really enough? Did it truly preserve what mattered, or was it only an image? "I guess you're right," Elias said, his voice quieter now. "But what about you? Do you have photographs, memories of your own?" Zaravira's eyes narrowed slightly, her gaze softening as she looked away for a moment. It was clear that the question had taken her by surprise. She had always been a ruler, a queen who had never needed to look back. But there was something in Elias' tone that made her pause, something that made her reconsider the idea of memories. "We do not capture memories in the same way you do," she replied, her voice distant now, as if she were speaking of something long forgotten. "Our species has lived for millennia. Our memories are not bound to images. We remember things through the very fabric of our being. We experience moments as they are, and they remain within us, part of us. We do not need pictures to remind us of what we have lived." Elias was fascinated. He had never thought about memory in such a profound way. The idea that Zaravira's species could remember everything without needing photographs was almost incomprehensible to him. It was as if they lived in a constant state of perfect recollection, without the need for reminders or objects to trigger memories. "That's incredible," Elias said, his voice filled with awe. "But if you can remember everything, why do you need to capture anything at all?" Zaravira turned her gaze back to him, her eyes locking with his. "Because even we, in all our long lives, must sometimes forget. Some memories are too heavy to carry, and so we let them fade. The mind can only hold so much. It is why we do not rely on photographs. They are reminders, but they are not the truth." Elias was silent for a long moment, processing her words. They weighed heavily on him, forcing him to reflect on his own life and the way he viewed memories. His mind wandered to his family, his friends, the people he had lost over the years. Could it be true that memories were not just images, not just things to hold onto and revisit? Could they be something more, something tied to the very essence of a person's being? I never thought about it that way," Elias said quietly, almost to himself. "We hold on to things because we're afraid of forgetting, afraid of losing the parts of ourselves that matter." Zaravira nodded slowly, as if she understood exactly what he was saying. "It is a human instinct, yes, but for us, forgetting is not always a loss. Sometimes it is a release." Elias found himself staring at the queen, a mixture of admiration and confusion swirling in his chest. Here was a being who had lived for thousands of years, someone who had experienced the rise and fall of entire civilizations, and yet she spoke of forgetting with a sense of peace, as if it was an inevitable part of life. "What if we want to remember?" Elias asked. "What if the memories are too precious to let go of?" Zaravira's eyes softened, and for a moment Elias saw a flicker of something, maybe understanding, maybe sympathy. "Then you hold on to them, but understand that not all memories are meant to stay." Some are meant to fade to make space for new experiences. Elias sat in silence, contemplating her words. It was a perspective he had never considered. The idea that memories could be both a gift and a burden, that they could be both precious and fleeting, was something that felt both comforting and unsettling at the same time. Before he could respond, Zaravira stood up, her graceful movement commanding the room once again. "You may go now, Elias," she said, her voice now carrying an air of finality. "I have given you much to think about." Elias nodded, standing as well. He had come here to discuss politics, trade, and alliances, but somehow this conversation had led him into something far deeper. It was as though he had been given a glimpse into the mind of a ruler, a being who saw the world in a way he could never imagine. As he turned to leave, Elias couldn't help but feel that this strange encounter with Zaravira had opened up something in him. She had challenged him to rethink everything he knew about memory, about the past, and about what it meant to truly hold onto something. And while he wasn't sure he fully understood it yet, he knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again. As the door closed behind him, Elias took a deep breath, trying to process everything that had just happened. What did all of this mean? Was it simply a conversation, or was there something more? Only time would reveal the answers. The days that followed Elias' conversation with Queen Zaravira felt like a blur. He spent much of his time wandering the palace grounds, lost in thought. What had started as a diplomatic mission had quickly turned into something far more complicated. His encounter with the Queen had left him with questions that dug deep into his understanding of memory, identity, and the nature of connection. In the quiet moments when he wasn't working on his official duties, Elias often found himself thinking back to her words. Not all memories are meant to stay. Some are meant to fade to make space for new experiences. The more he thought about it, the more he realized how much he had been holding onto, how many memories he had stored away, unable to let go. His family, his home, the people he had lost, these were the memories that kept him grounded, that defined who he was. But what if they were not meant to stay forever? Zaravira had spoken with such wisdom, as if she had lived 1,000 lives and seen the rise and fall of entire civilizations. She understood the weight of memory, the burden it could bring. For her, forgetting wasn't a loss, it was a release, a way to make space for new experiences. The idea was both freeing and terrifying. One evening, after another long day of diplomatic discussions, Elias found himself once again in the Queen's presence. This time, the atmosphere felt different. There was a palpable tension in the air, a sense of something shifting. Zaravira had summoned him to her private chambers, a place he had only visited once before. As he entered, he was struck by the quiet beauty of the room. The walls were lined with shelves of strange artifacts, ancient relics from a time long past. The lighting was soft, casting a warm glow on everything it touched. Zaravira was standing near a large window, looking out over the alien city below. Her posture was regal, but there was something else in her expression, something far more human than Elias had expected. She wasn't just a queen in that moment. She was a person, a being with her own thoughts and emotions, just like him. "Elias," she said, her voice soft yet commanding, "I have been thinking." Elias approached her cautiously, unsure of what to expect. "About what, Your Majesty?" "About you," she replied. "About your people, your memories, and your attachment to things that are fleeting." Elias stood silent for a moment. It wasn't like the Queen to speak so openly, so personally. There was a vulnerability in her voice that caught him off guard. I don't fully understand what you mean," he admitted, his voice low. "You've shown me a different way of thinking, but it's hard for me to let go of the past. I don't know how." Zaravira turned to face him, her dark eyes locking with his. "It is not easy, Elias, it never is. But sometimes the past can hold you back from what is truly important. Your people, humans, cling to memories as if they are the only thing that defines you. But there is so much more to life than what has already happened." Elias felt the weight of her words. He had spent so much of his life holding on to the past, to what he had lost, that he had never really allowed himself to move forward. He had been defined by his memories, by the people and places that no longer existed. But Zaravira was right. Perhaps he had been holding on to them too tightly. "I don't know if I can just forget," Elias said quietly, the uncertainty in his voice clear. "These memories are all I have left. They're what keep me connected to who I am." The Queen's gaze softened. She took a step closer to him, her presence commanding yet comforting. You do not have to forget, Elias, but you must learn to let go, to free yourself from the past so that you can truly experience the present. Elias swallowed hard, his mind racing. What was she asking of him? To let go of the past, to move on. It seemed impossible, yet there was a part of him that longed for something more, something beyond the weight of his memories. He looked at Zaravira, her face a picture of calm and understanding, and for the first time since arriving on this alien world, he felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was a way forward. I will try, he said quietly, his voice steadying. But I'm not sure I can do it alone. You do not have to, Zaravira replied, her voice filled with reassurance. I will be here, Elias, I will help you, but you must be willing to face the truth about yourself. You must be willing to change. Her words resonated within him, deepening the sense of conflict that had been growing inside him ever since he arrived. The life he had known, the life he had fought to preserve, was not the only way. There was more to the world than the memories he clung to, more to the universe than what he had experienced. But letting go of that part of himself was terrifying. How could he be someone new? How could he ever forget the people he had loved, the places he had left behind? For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was thick with unspoken words, with the weight of everything that had been said and everything that had not. Finally, Zaravira broke the silence. You have done well, Elias, she said, her voice filled with a quiet pride. You have come farther than most would in such a short time, but there is still much for you to learn, much for you to experience. Elias nodded, a sense of determination settling in his chest. He didn't know where this journey would take him, but for the first time, he was willing to face it head-on. He was ready to let go, ready to move forward, even if it meant leaving behind everything he had known. Zaravira stepped back, her eyes scanning him as if measuring his resolve. There is more to life than what you see in front of you, Elias. Your people are not the only ones in this universe. There are beings out there who have lived for centuries, who have experienced things you cannot even begin to imagine. But you must be open to those experiences. You must be willing to change. I understand, Elias said, his voice firm. I will try. I will learn to let go. Zaravira nodded, a slight smile playing at the corners of her lips. Good, you are ready for what comes next. Elias felt a shiver run down his spine. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He had changed. This meeting with the Queen had altered something deep within him, something he couldn't quite explain. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time since arriving, Elias felt a sense of peace. He wasn't alone in this journey anymore. The Queen had shown him a new way of thinking, a new way of being, and he was ready to embrace it. Before he left the Queen's chambers, Zaravira spoke again, her voice soft but filled with finality. Elias, there is something else you should know, she said. The decision that I will make in the coming days will change the course of history. It will affect not only my people, but yours as well. And I want you to be prepared for the consequences. What you choose to do in the coming days will determine the future of both our worlds. Elias looked at her, his heart pounding in his chest. What was she talking about? What decision? But before he could ask, Zaravira turned away, her expression unreadable. Now go, she said. Rest, you will need your strength for what comes next. Elias nodded, his mind reeling. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. His life was no longer the same. The Queen had given him something far more valuable than any political alliance or trade agreement. She had given him the chance to change, to grow, to experience life in a way he had never imagined. And as he left the room, Elias felt a strange sense of anticipation. The future was waiting, and he was ready to face it, no matter what it might bring.